Alright, so today we're reacting to the second part of Rogal Dorn by Baldermort, and this is going to be from that 3-part video series, so links are going to be down in the description below for the actual video and channel, so go ahead and make sure that you check them out. Now, it's been a while since I saw the first half of this video, and I think it's been about a month, roughly, so I may have forgotten a little bit of stuff, but from what I do know is that they're barely about to go into a little more what Rogal Dorn is going to be about, because I believe at the beginning was more of the him just coming up and all that. So without wasting too much more time, let's go ahead and get right into the video.
From there, the days of the crusade began for Rogal Dorn and his newly forged legion, the 7th, the Imperial Fists. The crusade was a constant struggle, a constant war, but one Rogel was more than equipped for in every way. He started fighting alongside the Emperor, as all of the Primarchs did, bar only one. When he had been moulded, and the Emperor had decided it was time, Rogel was seconded to the forces of his oldest brother. I say oldest, as in he was the first found by the Emperor, the longest serving at his side, the most trusted and trained by the Emperor. He was Horus Lupercal, the hammer of the Emperor, and later, his Warmaster. Rogel finally serving alongside not only an equal for first time in his life, but one he considered worthy of his respect, and perhaps a little of adoration. For to Rogel, Horus Lupercal was everything a Primarch and statesman, warrior and leader should be. Rogel.
But because he was the first, and the fact that, I don't know how long Chaos would try to do things, or like the Chaos Gods would be doing things as far as like little planting seeds, I guess if you want to call it, to like later become something else further on down the line. So the main thing being is that what if he was found first, because the Chaos Gods were already kind of setting him up to maybe have the most experience with the Emperor, really see what he was about, and then slowly start turning that. And then it kind of happened also with the although I don't know what point the word bearers Primarch was actually found, because if I remember correctly, it was from the word bearers. This dude named Erebus was really the start of all this, but maybe he was found first on purpose, or it could have just been completely by accident as well. Also, because I do remember people saying that the Emperor does have a way with the psychic abilities to actually find them, right?
And Horus were fast friends and firm ones. Once Horus...
A little off topic, if you have seen the 70s shows, does Horus not look like Red from the 70s shows? He's got the same face, same wrinkles, everything. But, okay.
Horus himself stated that his legion, the Lunar Wolves, later to be called the Sons of Horus after Alinor, were the finest in assault, and that if you met the Imperial Fists in war, that it would be an unending stalemate. The irresistible force versus the immovable object. So high in Horus's opinion was his loyal and redoubtable brother Rogel. They fought side by side as brothers on many campaigns. They thought they would never be anything but the closest of friends. But Rogel was most often in the theatres of war led directly by the Emperor, and became known to be like a shadow to the master of mankind. Rogel also made bonds with other Primarchs over many campaigns thereafter, but he was not charismatic or outgoing, and could be known as blunt, so did not always fit in or act in a way to elicit true friendship. The other Primarch he shared a special bond with was, of course, the one Primarch that nearly all of the brothers not only respected but loved. It was Sanguinius, the Primarch of the Blood Angels.
I know I'm going to watch the Blood Angels. I'm hearing so many things about them, especially very recently. And very soon. Very soon. If I remember correctly, Sanguinius is the ones that do the red. Or like, was it like they take some blood in and then they go like crazy because they're, well, not crazy, but like, because they're reliving their Primarch's final moments. And they get like this insane boost from like drinking blood. So like kind of like the vampire thing. If I can remember that correctly.
Sanguinius, he found the traits that most exemplified the goal of the crusade and the best in humanity, despite Sanguinius's obvious mutation, the wings that grew out of his back. Rogel and Sanguinius' relation was only to grow into one of true camaraderie and respect. In the dark times that followed, it was always his brother Sanguinius in which he trusted. In the war to end all wars, it was his brother the angel that strode forth when he could not, despite Rogel wishing with all his heart that he could go instead and save the angel, just in case. It was also his brother Sanguinius alone who shared in the burden of the defense of the palace. But we get ahead of ourselves. Sanguinius, Rogel, and Horus formed a special friendship that few understood. They had something in common that only one other shared. But for that we must wait for the moment. In the crusade, the forces of the Imperium pushed forever out and out, further and further. None could stop.
Also, so they're getting their little groups instead of their groups. I mean, obviously, the biggest family I've ever heard of is actually from a mom's side of the family who had, she had 5 sisters and 6 brothers, right? So 12 kids in total. But obviously, when you have a lot of kids like that, I'm assuming, obviously, you're going to form little groups. And I wonder if forming these little groups, there was actually maybe a little bit of a correlation as to people being able to drag others, I guess, to the loyalist side or the traitor side.
None could gainsay their power, their purpose, their path. And in the crusade, all of the worst horrors of old night, the period of humanity's weakness and need, were highlighted in graphic display. The Xenos tyrants they fought, crushing humans under their feet. The mad sorcerers and psychers who dominated all life for systems around. The degradation of humanity was finally over whenever the crusade arrived. The crusade, as far as Rogel was concerned, brought emancipation, safety, and hope to all of the lost tribes of humanity, and it punished their gaulers, their abusers, and their foes. Where other legions moved forward in lightning swift raids and brought planets into Imperial compliance fast, but moved on as quickly, it was not the way of the Imperial fists. Where Horus might have won the Imperium, it is said that Rogal Dorn built it. Wherever a war had been fought, Rogel set up defences and hard points, castles and keeps, so that no insurrection would rise, but also so those worlds he conquered were defensible, and their peoples left with pride. He built each world up and did not move on until he had improved the conditions of all those who lived there, as his brother Horus had taught him, and his father, the Emperor, had instructed him. Rogel believed. Where others fought for the battle, or for glory, or for accolades and honours, Rogel fought because he believed. He believed in his brothers. He believed in his father. But most important of all, he believed in the dream. The bright and beaming dream of a humanity free, safe and happy, where they need not fear the skies or the dark or privation.
So the part when he said about him, or like when they were saying that Horus would just kind of fuck shit up and then move on pretty quickly, and that Rogel was actually staying there and make sure that things were improving before they went out. So essentially assuring that whatever place they went through can actually defend itself once they're gone, right? Because obviously they can't be there all the time. They got to be able to move on with the crusade. So at first it kind of starts to hit you as far as like, well, Horus just cares about the war aspect, but then I do remember him saying right now that Horus was like, he set up defenses as Horus had taught him. So it was more of a, I guess if you want to say, like, it's a job that somebody has to do, and Rogal Dorn obviously just goes, hey, I'll do it. But I mean, obviously curiosity would kind of say, like, what if it was the other way around as far as Rogel going forward? Like, maybe it was like a, then again, the Imperial fists are probably more suited for it. Yeah, just disregard what I was about to say.
No ignorance. Rogel fought for a better tomorrow for his entire race, and he built that better tomorrow with every castle, keep, and border he constructed. Rogel believed in the dream of the Imperium of man. The crusade came to a head finally with 2 great campaigns. One I cannot mention here, but the other was the campaign at Alinor. At Alinor, the greatest collection of greenskins ever witnessed occurred, and the forces of the Imperium of Man rose to the occasion. It was the Emperor and Horus Lupercal who met this threat head-on. Others were involved, but it was these two titans of war that met the leadership of the Alinor Orcs at the heaviest of the fighting. On the day the great Orc war boss finally was brought to Brook, the Emperor himself was saved by Horus, who beheaded the greenskin warlord, and the battle and the war was over. In recompense for this,
so it really seems like Rogel, from what I've heard and what I've been hearing, is that he's more of the, to not say it without any like awkwardness, but like he's a very what would you call it, like the background character, or probably the person that you don't really see getting probably recognition, although obviously being one of the more popular Primarchs from what I've also seen. I feel like this is just the initial, like initially maybe he was just kind of like, I mean, Primarch, yes, but like, is his, I guess, glory, I guess if you want to say, is like being overshined by like Horus. But then throughout time, he starts to get his own spotlight, right? And which is kind of what makes him popular, at least from what I think.
By the mountain of accolades and proofs of loyalty, fidelity, and ability, did the Emperor elevate Horus Lupercal to the exalted state of Warmaster. The Emperor set him above his brothers to lead them as he had done beforehand. And with that, the Emperor then left the crusade to return home to Terra to deal with other issues. It was one of the greatest days in the life of Rogel, for he could genuinely admired his big brother and supported him, and, despite never showing it, as it was not his way, he was so happy for Horus. He thought no other would have made sense. And Horus repaid that trust and augmented it by secreting himself for a time and asking Rogel to help him reinvent himself, to define and agree the identity and duties of a Warmaster, and to set a bar that Horus must always hold himself to. Horus came to Rogel as one of his closest friends, but also as one of the most accomplished and powerful of all of the Primarchs in the arts of war. Also, to some extent, he came in statescraft, and how to manage his other brothers, for he had not forgotten that Rogal Dorn had once, before his finding by the Emperor, been monarch of an empire of warriors. The administrative approach of Gulliman would not have suited the situation, much as he is lauded for his ability, as it was a congregation of warriors of legend that Horus would have to ride, have to bend to his will, his direction. It could not be done by diktat. After a time, the Emperor recalled Dorn.
Did you say diktat? And I could have sworn they just made of Robert Rabute Gilliman. Man, that guy really gets no love. But obviously, I mean, since Horus and Rogel are very close, I don't think I've seen or heard of anything about what was Rogel's initial reaction to finding out that Horus had turned traitor. Like, I don't know if it was like with, I mean, probably not like kind of like what happened with Gavriel Loken, right? From the Horus Heresy book, where I think it was in the Horus Heresy, or I think it was the video where he gets found by Grey Knights. Yeah, it was in the Grey Knight video by Luton09, and he kind of has like some form of PTSD, right? Because to him, it was unbelievable that Horus would ever turn traitor, and then would also try to get him to turn traitor as well. So I don't know. I'd be curious to kind of see what Rogel's initial reaction. Maybe he's just like dumbfounded. He can't believe this is happening, or he just gets absolutely pissed, right? I'm trying to remember though if Rogel was at the Emperor killed Horus on the bridge. I think it was. And I think there was like one dude that tried to, I think it was like a regular Imperial guard, right? That tried to stand in front of Horus, and Horus just kind of fucking one-shotted him. I don't remember him being there though. So, I don't know.
To Terra, to be his Praetorian. The Emperor of Mankind had his body and palace guards in the Custodians, the 10,000. But yet he called back Rogel to be with him, to protect Terra and the Sol system, and to improve the defences of the Imperial Palace, much as they thought they would not be needed. Many were aggrieved at this singular honour, Perturabo of the Iron Warriors in particular railed against this favoritism shown to Rogel, but Rogel did not care. Rogal Dorn knew that he was the best man to be at his father's side. I have a theory as to another reason that Rogel might have been at the Emperor's side. But again, we must wait for that dreaded moment.
Did the Emperor already maybe have his own suspicions of certain quote-unquote Primarchs, as in Horus, falling to chaos? And realize that he might try to go for Terra in general first?
And it was at this point that the horror began in earnest. And nothing Rogel had seen before this prepared him for what was to come. Nothing could. Whilst he was leading a small contingent of his hand-picked guard on his way to Terra to take up his position as Praetorian, Rogel found a lost ship hailing for assistance. It was the Eisenstein. Aboard were Death Guard who demanded to speak with him immediately. In that fateful moment, that most charged of encounters, Rogal Dorn found out the terrible truth. The Death Guard warrior, Captain Nathaniel Garrow, was the harbinger of doom to Rogel, as he informed the Primarch that his brother, Horus Lupercal, had turned traitor and had recruited others, and they were now in open rebellion against their father.
So this was the moment, because I do remember in the little Death Guard video from the Temple Institute was that I think it was a third of the Death Guard had to be killed, right? Because they were remaining loyalists. So I'm assuming this was like a little group of them who managed to get away.
For this, Garrow nearly lost his life, as Rogel was so staggered in rage.
Well, first of all, he just says staggered in rage, so he's pissed off. Garrow. God, what does that name sound familiar? I don't know. Hopefully it comes back to me.
By this infamy that he doubted Garrow so much he nearly killed him. Even though enough evidence came forward to prove the word of Garrow and confirm that the worst nightmare had started. The Warmaster, Horus, had turned his back on the Imperium and the Emperor, and was preparing to make war on all those who remained loyal to the throne. Poor Rogel. One cannot imagine the crushing, heart-rending desolation he must have felt at this news. Why he could not accept it immediately. For one of his brothers turning against the Emperor was one thing. Perhaps Angron, or humiliated Lorgar, or even the insane Conrad. But for his oldest brother, his big brother, the one he admired the most, the one he had vested the most hope in, to have fallen. In that moment it shook Rogal Dorn to the core. Out of nowhere, the hope, the dream of the Imperium was wounded, as it had never been before for Rogel. For one of his brothers to turn would have elicited rage, not confusion. How Rogel must have hurt then. To have the greatest and closest Primarch to the Emperor, his Warmaster, a most trusted son, to turn on him was beyond belief. For Horus Lupercal had turned his back not only on his sire, not only on his loyal brothers, but on the dream of the Imperium. Also, this would have thrown Rogel into such confusion, for if Horus, the brightest light, and the Primarch who seemed so ardently to believe in the hope of the crusade, for Horus to call it a lie was almost too much to bear. Rogel must have wanted to take flight to confront his brother immediately, not to fight him, but to implore him to return to the light. But no.
Was there a possibility that he could be, well, I mean, to quote, like, see the light, I guess, like, for him to turn back to a loyalist and no longer be a traitor? But imagine if you were, like, in his shoes, how would you feel? Like right now, from what it seems like it's a lot more guessing as to what he was feeling, right? Probably a little bit of everything, like anger, sadness, probably depression setting in, probably like self-doubt and everything, because they did say that he's kind of wasn't believing in it at first, but then with all the evidence being brought forward, so a mixed bag of emotions. So what would you do though if you were in his situation?
Dorn, the warrior inside the soul of this Primarch, must have known. As soon as he heard that 3 of his brothers had fallen into the darkness surrounding Horus, he knew. He knew that Horus was not alone, and that the others would buoy him up and keep him on the course he was on. The likes of Angron or Mortarion were understandable. But Fulgrim? Shock upon shock. Horror upon nightmare. Grief piled on grief. With such surrounding him, Rogel knew that Horus would not be able to be taken from his path, would never be able to bend the knee and beg for clemency. He needed to be adored, so did Horus. So the die was cast, and Dorn knew it would not wash off. Dorn sent his fleet to the Isstvan system where the treachery was occurring, and took himself and his elite to Terra to inform his father, the Emperor. Horus.
So he said Angron, right? Just because of like kind of how he came up, and Mortarion, that they were both understandable, but someone like Fulgrim being a Castlevania dude, looking like the guy that was really hot, that they didn't kill him, and that was the reason. What would have been the reason for him? Because it seemed like when he said it that it looked like a surprise to him, right? That he would even turn traitor. Huh. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen the Emperor's Children Legion, so I don't know.
Lupercal had turned to evil. He had been seduced by the dark powers of corruption, the dark gods of chaos. More than this, he had turned other brothers with him. The visitors from the Eisenstein reported that Horus had turned Angron of the World Eaters, Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children, and Mortarion of the Death Guard. 4 full legions were in revolt, led by the most able general of them all. Rogel returned to Terra, and his father, the Emperor, issued a full 7 legions and their Primarchs to destroy the rebellion. As the arch-traitors mounted their defense and raised their banner on Isstvan 5, the retribution force of the Emperor prepared to land. 3 legions were to make landfall first and assault the strong points of the traitors, to then be supported by the other 4. The Salamanders, Iron Hands and Raven Guard landed on Isstvan and began their furious attack on the positions of Horus and his treacherous brothers. What happened next is too complex and too important to cover here, but in very brief. The 3 were tricked. They were betrayed. For the other 4 legions that landed behind them, the Word-Bearers, Alpha Legion, Iron Warriors, and Night Lords, had already gone over to the ruinous powers. They landed and set up fortifications, then joined with Horus's forces and simply blasted the 3 loyalist legions to smithereens. And when they were done with that, they drew out their chainswords and engaged in close combat. The butchery was great. The 3 loyalist legions, the Salamanders, Raven Guard and Iron Hands, were taken by surprise, betrayed and nearly exterminated that day. But worst of all, brother actually slew brother. Although Corvus Corax, Primarch of the Raven Guard, and Vulcan, Primarch of the Salamanders, managed to escape that terrible trap, Ferrus Manus, the Primarch of the Iron Hands, was slain, his head cut off his shoulders by his erstwhile best friend and closest confidant in all of the Primarchs, no less than his brother Fulgrim. What occurred to the Imperial fist near Isstvan will be covered in their own video, but after a short period Rogel issued their recall to the Sol system to assist in its defense. His legion, despite having the upper hand against a more numerous opponent.
I was about to say, if they were on a planet and they were going in, then obviously they're not occupying the whole planet, so I'm assuming there'd be some bystanders on somewhere else on the planet. But I was saying that if they were all in one area, why not instead of sending people there, use exterminatus, right? Although I know that's in the most insane situations. And kind of a fucked up way to look at it, once they had landed and they found that the other legions were also traitors, if somehow the Salamanders, the Raven Guard, and the Iron Hands were to escape from there, or at least hold off a little bit until they can get a ship or whatever they used to use, exterminatus, get out of the area, and then be able to use that and to kind of take all the whole traitor legions. I know it'd be a little more complicated as far as logistics and actually getting everything there and everything set up. And then actually, I mean, I would assume it's a slow process in that they would be able to see it and probably get out of the way in time. I don't know. It's just kind of something that popped in my head.
And were winning, did as instructed, and taking casualties. They withdrew from combat and made their way to Terra as instructed. For the Imperial fists were ever obedient to their lord, no matter the situation. The next few years were a living hell for Rogal Dorn. He was given command of the remainder of the loyalist armies as the new Warmaster of the Emperor, outnumbered and constantly outmaneuvered by his brother, Horus Lupakal. The war always seemed to go against Rogel. He fought like a tiger, organized like a whirlwind, and was as tactically astute as any who could have filled his role. Better perhaps even than his opposite number, if their roles were reversed. But the inevitable occurred, and the loyalists were pushed back again and again. Nor would all of his brothers obey his commands, nor follow his lead, despite the stakes involved. Leman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wars, went off on his own rampage, nearly slaying the traitor Warmaster, but he did not finish the job when he had the chance. Then he and his legion and fleet were forced into consecutive battles, all designed for one thing, the one thing Rogel feared most: the prevention of the Valka Fenrika, the Space Wolves, from being able to return to defend the Palace of Terra. Rogel was practically alone, his father fighting in the webway, his closest brothers defeated or in far-flung battle and unable to answer his klaxon call to the throne world. He only had Jagatai, a brother that few knew, fewer still liked or trusted, despite him doing nothing to deserve the reaction.
So the whole part about, obviously, you would want to consolidate forces, right? And establish at some point someone who's actually going to be the one in charge. For example, especially if you're dealing with adjacent units. And then if everyone's just kind of saying, no, we're going to do it things their own way, well, now you're just separating everybody, and then they're going to get picked off one by one, which is kind of what it seemed like it was happening. And, I mean, it seems like given, I don't know, what would you call it for, like personal glory? Or maybe like personal vendettas that the loyalists had against some of the traitor ones, sometimes gets the better of people, right? Essentially putting anything that might be considered like a petty thing aside. It sounds kind of weird, but doing it for the greater good as far as like working together with everyone else. Because anybody on this side of the line is your ally. Anyone on that side of the line is an enemy type deal, right? So why would you be trying to fight two fronts? Hey, so I forgot to add this part in the video just because it didn't come to mind when I was watching it. But I had recently watched a video from the channel The Front about why the Japanese Navy and Army hated each other. Now, what reminded me from this video was like you got a whole bunch, here you've got a whole bunch of legions that don't really want to work together, and that Rogel is kind of working by himself as far as trying to squash this rebellion. But also with the video from The Front, I never knew that the Army and the Navy from Japan really hated each other to the point that the Emperor had to actually get involved. And now from what I understood is that there was two families, right, that they were very old ones, like had like long lineages and all that, and one of them had the Navy, and the other one was more in the Army. Now, at times where I heard that the reason the Japanese Army also lost certain battles were because the Navy just wouldn't support them with either supplies, whether helping them retreat to a better location or anything like that. And sometimes when the Navy would need help, Army would say no, right? So you got two groups who are fighting for the same purpose, but they're trying to do it their own way. And at least here with the Primarchs, they're loyalists, they're not trying to sabotage each other or like not really trying to do anything negative to each other, when the Japanese Navy and the Army were actually not really engaging each other from what I remember from the video, but they're not helping each other like at all, and even trying to go out of their way at certain points to not help them, which also added to them losing at the end, right? And also there's a whole bunch of other things, but I just thought that was a really good comparison for today's world.
Rogel was, to all intents and purposes, so very, very alone. At this point, I will apologize again to you, my gentle listeners, for I cannot bring myself to rush this subject, the very soul of Warhammer 40k. I had believed I would be able to condense this tale into but one video, but I find the subject matter, the work, is too great. I will not sacrifice the journey to the destination, for it would diminish the impact and import of the whole. For this reason, I will ask your indulgence and beg for your forgiveness, for the content is too large. I must end this installment here.
Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about that for a minute. Now, obviously at this point, it just seems like he's depressed, right? I mean, he's literally, everything was kind of going good, and then all of a sudden, steep drop, right? And now everything's going to shit. And I mean, I feel like that also happens to a lot of us in life. I've had a few friends that they had a good job, they had a great girlfriend, and then they had gotten a new car, and everything's going pretty well. And then all of a sudden, girlfriend leaves. The person gets, I don't think he got fired. I think he got suspended for whatever reason. And then all of a sudden, the car starts having problems, and everything's kind of a lot of this also, from what I've seen here as well, is that everything that bad that happens, or at least from what I've seen and what I've experienced in my own life, and I'm pretty sure you all have experienced as well, is that a lot of the bad things happen all at once, or that's what it seems like it happens. But when good things happen, they happen very gradually, kind of sometimes separated, sometimes all at once, but I feel like that's more on the rare occasion. So I feel like that's kind of what happened here. Correct me if I'm wrong. But at this point, the reason why he's so blunt, I mean, I know he was supposed to be considered blunt and kind of like straight to the point, right? And that he would never let, I guess, his emotions really show, right? Even though he was happy for Horus when he got the Warmaster title, and he was genuinely happy for him, and that he was also happy that Horus actually went to him to try to reinvent himself, right? But then, considering all this happening, I feel like, I mean, there's no indication that I can see it, but I'm just going to assume that when Rogel and today was even more blunt, or very more straight faced, like a drill sergeant, drill instructor type deal, just because he's trying to put up a barrier to not have that same emotion that probably made him feel vulnerable. And right, considering being a Primarch, he probably felt weird about that, like as far as like something actually hurting him mentally. So I feel like that's probably why he also puts up this defense, and also because his job is kind of like working in the defense, right? That's a pretty cool connection. I just thought of that, and so like him setting up a defense is like him setting up his own defense internally. Shit, that was good. But that was the biggest thing as far as like, I mean, because obviously it dealt with more with him personally, and just kind of like everything that's going on. When they say he's practically fighting alone, because none of the other Primarchs or loyalists really want to try to fight together. It seems like they're all trying to just go at it their own way. But I think this is what, what would it be called? Steady, unyielding willingness. I think that was the quote. Or like that silent stamina, or silent prevailing. They said it in Hell's Reach too. They said it about Nero, which is why they chose him. damn it. Essentially, no matter what happens, still go forward, and it's more under the, I think it was unyielding perseverance, right? In that, and I don't know, if you think about Rogal Dorn, he just looks like a man's man, in my opinion, and I feel like that's also kind of the reason why he's popular. That he straight to the point. No matter what shit happens, he tries to regroup, get things done. If I had to choose, choose your own as well. Just to end the video off here, if you had to pick your own Warmaster, right? But it had to be someone else than Horus. And considering all the Primarchs are still loyal, I feel like Rogal Dorn would probably be in there. Maybe Lionel Johnson, I think the name was, of the Dark Angels. I feel like between those two. Probably, yeah. But in any case, that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, really does help me a lot. Hit that notification bell so you get notified every time I do upload. Or hit that dislike button and leave me a little comment as to maybe what it was. So, without further ado though, I'll see you all in the next video. I really messed that outro up.